Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of All in the Mishpacha. Here on the cover, Finger on the Pulse. Rabbi Joey Haber addresses real issues with clarity, conviction, and compassion. Apparently, there's an up-and-coming rabbi. Looks, I don't know, youngish, probably 40s. They pose a number of questions to him about marriage, about educating your children, about chinuch. Apparently, he has the answer to everything. I didn't agree with everything he said, but I'm not going to talk about that because it doesn't interest me that much. I want to talk today about a little politics over here. Binyamin Rose, deja vu in Gaza. Anyone who's familiar, definitely people who lived here in Israel, know what just happened about a week ago. It ended about a week ago on Motzei Shabbos. It was a 5-day, I guess you call it a war. It was an operation in Gaza. It really started because the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, took out 3 of the top terrorists of Islamic Jihad. There's basically 2 terrorist groups. The main group is Hamas, but they weren't involved in this conflict. It was Islamic Jihad, which is an Iranian, also backed by Iran, primarily backed by Iran, which was firing rockets. They fired about 1,500 rockets into Israel over the course of 5 days. Most of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome. There were a couple of casualties. I think maybe two Israelis died. And it stopped after about 5 days. That was it. And the author, the Binyamin Rose, is basically saying deja vu. This happens almost every summer over here with whatever reason something sets off, whether it's Israel initiates something or they initiate something. You have these little skirmishes for a couple of days, a week and a half, and then it's over, and you go back. And the question is really, who's winning over here? Is it, did anyone win? Is it a standoff? Is there any way to stop these conflicts from happening? What do you do about this problem? Not just Islamic Jihad, but also Hamas when they get involved. Some people, so it's really a political issue, and it's a big political issue over here. As someone who lives here, it's not just limited to 2 people that were killed here. Yes, you're right, Israel has an amazing defense system. They have the Iron Dome, this thing, David Sling, which intercepts most of these rockets. Most people don't die here. There are very few casualties. In fact, there were some people actually in Gaza who actually died because the rockets did not even make it into Israel and actually killed people in Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza. It killed them from their own friendly fire. The issue over here is, what do you do about such a situation like this? They're always firing rockets over here, and what people don't realize, if you don't live in Israel, is that because these rockets are fired indiscriminately, especially in the south, I don't know how people in the south, places like Sderot, places like Ashkelon, I don't know how you live, even the whole year around, because it's not just during these wars. A lot of times they'll just fire missiles, overnight, and air raid sirens are going off Sderot, Ashkelon all the time. People have to go into these bunkers. If they don't have a bunker, they're running for cover. And what was noted is that there's tons of people being treated for trauma. It's very traumatizing. I remember the first time I was in Israel and an air raid siren went on. It's traumatizing. I was, in my mid-30s. I never heard an air raid siren before. It's very traumatizing. These sirens go off. Now, of course, that Israel has the Iron Dome and they'll probably intercept it, but there's always a chance that they won't. 10% of the rockets are not intercepted, and they could land anywhere and kill people. And it's scary. It's very scary. It's very traumatizing. A lot of people were treated and are being treated for trauma from the air raid sirens and running for cover. There have been stories over the years. It's almost the same amount of people have died from the actual rockets, have died from running away and tripping somewhere, and babies hitting their head and things like that, and people dying. It's very sad, some of these stories. People actually die while they're running away, running for cover, not because of the rockets, just because they trip or they fall or they get injured like that. So that's something that people don't realize if you don't live here in Israel. And anyone who's heard one of these air raid sirens. It's very traumatic. And, every night that week, going to sleep, you never know in the middle of the night you're going to wake up to hear an air raid siren. You don't feel comfortable going to sleep. It's scary. Some people can't sleep at night. It's very scary just to be living in Israel, even in the places where the rockets are not always sent, Now they're shooting more places. They were shooting to Tel Aviv, to central Israel. So it's not a small issue. It's not something that say, it's basically Israel takes care of it. It's only a one-sided battle. Because if you add up for the life of living in Israel, and never know when these skirmishes can happen. They can happen at any time, So what do you do about this situation over here? So I remember when Naftali Bennett was the prime minister. I don't know if people remember that. Only people in Israel probably know. He was a smaller politician. He somehow figured out how to make himself prime minister, how to even drag some Arab parties into his coalition to become prime minister for about a year. And even though the way he did it was, wrong, and he just did everything to get power, the one positive note that I took out from, and he was better at this than Netanyahu, who's been prime minister here for basically 20 years, best 15 years, is that he said Sderot are not second-class citizens. He will not tolerate just indiscriminately shooting into Israel. You can't just shoot rockets into Israel. People should not have to live like this with the air raid sirens going off on a regular basis. And he was much more vocal about this. And I think as a prime minister of Israel, you have to sort of threaten, and before anything happens, you have to let them know if they shoot into Israel, not after the fact, not you kill the terrorists and they start shooting and then you start to negotiate and shoot back, and you have to let them know the policy is there's zero policy, zero tolerance policy. You're not going to tolerate any rockets going into Sderot or anywhere else. They should not have the ability to do this, and it's really unfair the way Israel does it and the way international community looks at what goes on in Israel. Because I saw on YouTube there was a comedian. Now, I don't know why. This guy's name is Trevor Noah. He's one of the more popular comedians in America, maybe in the world. And for some reason, he has a video on YouTube where he has his own take about what should happen in the conflict between Israel and Gaza. He says he's not political. He's not aligned with either Palestine or Israel necessarily. His take on the whole concept was, he said, people in Gaza, it's like a child. A child goes to an adult and he hits the adult. A 5-year-old child goes and hits an adult. What does the adult do? The adult goes back and he beats up the child. Of course, he doesn't beat up the child. It's a little kid kicking at you. He says Israel is so sophisticated. They have the Iron Dome. They have all the protection they need. They're vastly superior militarily than Gaza. It's like the Arabs, like a little kid, knocking on your foot. You're not going to go beat them up. You're not going to go ahead and knock down buildings and take out terrorists. You absorb it. You let the kid hit you. You don't do anything. And this is his take, honest take. And a lot of people were in the comments, wow, what a take. What a smart guy. The problem with all these people, and people in America who are into BDS and a boycott, divest, sanction Israel for the apartheid that they do against the Palestinians. People say these things, when you have AOC in Congress and all the Rashida Tlaib. These people have no clue. They don't live here in Israel. They have no clue what they're saying. They don't even visit here. They have no clue. They've never been here during a war, right? They don't know. This guy doesn't know what the trauma is. He'd be traumatized also. He doesn't know what the trauma is if he was living in Israel. He doesn't know what it's like. And, to say it's like a little child, first of all, people die from these rockets. Second of all, people can't sleep at night. Third of all, people are traumatized and need to go to hospitals and to psychiatrists for the next 15 years because of the trauma that goes on every summer, basically. So it's a little more severe than that. That's a really weak parable. It's really one-sided. And first of all, most of the time, not all the time, and this time it was started, Netanyahu took out terrorists, but you have to take out terrorists because these people are plotting, the Islamic Jihad is targeting Israel. Israel is not going after these people. They're going after these people because these people are terrorists. These people are plotting to either send people into Israel to murder people in Israel. There's no Israelis going around. There's a lot of Arab Israelis. There's a lot of Arabs who live here in Israel, and people think they don't get treated fairly. But I've been living here the past 8 years. They get treated just as fairly. You go to any hospital, you go to any doctor's office. There's Arabs there all the time. They wait in the same lines as everybody else. They get the same exact service as everywhere else. And in certain circumstances, they even get better service because a lot of Jews are afraid of them. Because you never know. Not saying all Arabs are evil. Not all Arabs. Most of them are okay. They're fine citizens. But you never know which one's going to be a terrorist. Because there's a lot of times here in Israel where terrorists are sent in from the West Bank. They're sent in from Gaza. And there's so many plots that we don't even know about. The Shin Bet, which is basically like the FBI in America. There's for every one terrorist attack that happens, there's like 400 plots that are foiled that you don't hear about. So this is a constant problem. There's no Jew or Israeli who's Jewish going around being a terrorist and murdering Arabs. No one's going into Palestine or Gaza murdering Arabs. No one's going here and murdering Arab Israelis. But every week or month, you always hear of some sort of terrorist attack where either they're shooting an Israeli, or they're trying to blow up a bus or something like that, or blow up a bus stop. So this is a real concern, and they get the 100% exact same treatment. To claim that Israel is an apartheid state is completely false. People on these college campuses that propagate these ideas, they've never been to Israel. They just go with their emotional, feelings, probably anti-Semitic feelings. They have no reason, for some reason in the international community, Palestinians are considered the afflicted ones, and people always say that it's not fair. The Israelis took the land of the Palestinians. If you look simply into what happened in history, Israel was granted statehood by the United Nations after the British Mandate in 1947. They were granted a lot less than they have right now. And what happened right after they were granted statehood? The Arabs, the surrounding Arabs, attacked. They didn't want Israel here at all. And they lost that war. And then in 1967, they had a big plot to basically overrun entire Israel. They attacked Israel, and they lost that war, and they lost more land. And now they're crying that the Palestinian refugees have nowhere to go. They're the ones that attacked Israel. They lost the war, and then they're complaining to the international community how the Israelis subjugate them and apartheid, which is not true. You know how many people, Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, want to marry a Jewish woman? They want to marry Jewish because if you're married to a Jewish person, you can get Israeli citizenship. The Palestinians would love to be Israeli citizens because as an Israeli citizen, you get rights, right? Just as much as the Jewish people or the Christian people living here, you get the same exact rights and the same exact benefits as them. In a country which is, basically a first world country, the standard of living is pretty high compared to, neighboring countries, neighboring Islam countries. So whatever propaganda is being spread by international, and somehow the United Nations and international community believe this stuff. They believe the propaganda on college campuses that people are spreading, that BDS and stuff. People didn't live here. They spread propaganda there's some sort of apartheid over here. And they give these false narratives of the war and the wars that go on over here that, it's Israel's fault and Israel, they're attacking us. They're shooting indiscriminately. And the last point I want to make about this is that it's completely not fair. They're shooting Islamic Jihad, Hamas. They're shooting indiscriminately at civilians. Any other, they're questioning whether Putin is a war criminal or not. Why is he a war criminal? Because he's not just going after the military, he's blowing up buildings with civilians. That makes you a war criminal. When you instead of targeting the army or the military of a country, you target the civilians. They are allowed to shoot 1,500 rockets at civilians. That's who they're shooting at, the civilians. And when Israel goes in, during this latest campaign, every campaign, if there's a child next to any of the arsenal of missiles they want to take out, or a terrorist they want to take out, and there's even a slight chance that they'll kill a child, a Gazan child, They won't do it. They won't go to operation, even though they're missing out on killing numerous terrorists. They're missing out on taking out stockpiles of weapons that they're going to be used in the future to shoot at Israel. They won't do it. Why won't they do it? Because internationally, because then they complain to the AP and the international community, and look what they're doing to the Gazan children. Do you know that they're responsible for killing more children than the Israelis because their rockets misfire and kill Palestinian children in Gaza? So they're killing. They don't worry about their own children, but Israel worries about their children more. Now, listen, it's not fair. I don't know exactly what goes on in Gaza. You know, obviously the military groups, these terrorist groups, Islamic Jihad and Hamas, which rule the area. If you're living in Gaza, it's tough to be a citizen of Gaza because you're controlled by the military. And in a certain sense, you should not be held responsible for these governments that are, you know, basically shooting at Israel and terrorists. That's really what they are. Everyone says they're terrorist groups. And it's not right to kill them, but I don't think Israel has to be so ethical, to be honest with you. And I think that we don't have to, Israel should not worry about what the world says. You have to protect yourselves. You have to stop these skirmishes. You have to stop them. And there's no reason why you have to be more moral than the rest of the world. Forget about what the rest of the world says. And I even think, I don't know all the particulars that go on in the government, but I really believe, especially now with Joe Biden as the president of America, who has a really icy relationship with Netanyahu. They never had a good relationship. They all fake that they love each other. When Joe Biden came to Israel, he says, "You know I love you." They hate each other. Joe Biden was vice president under Obama. Obama and Netanyahu didn't get along. Joe Biden gets along worse with Netanyahu than Obama did. They're not friends at all. Joe Biden has not invited him to the White House yet, which has never happened. Apparently, America and Israel are two of the strongest allies. And Biden has no plans of inviting Netanyahu, his best friend, one of his best friends in the world, and biggest ally. You know, America and Israel are biggest allies. He'll invite other important people to the White House, but Netanyahu he won't invite. I think it's time for Israel to basically. The reason that they don't do these things and they're so worried about international condemnation is not really every country condemning them. They're worried about America, what America's going to have to say. And America. If you do something that America's not happy about, America supplies a lot of the money to supplement the Iron Dome and things like that. They're getting a lot of funds from America. It's been cut down over the last couple of years. They don't want to break the relationship with America, but you know, if it really was a big war, you know, here in Israel, there shouldn't be. You know, Lebanon, you know, has remained on the side because it's dangerous for them to get into war. They have much better weapons than Gaza, than Hamas or Islamic Jihad. They have precision, you know, missiles which can be fired anywhere in Israel, which are a lot more dangerous. If there was really a serious war, or Iran got involved, you know, Iran has nuclear weapons now, probably. If there was a serious war, you know, this was happening in 1990, the Persian Gulf War. Basically, they were told by Bush, you can't do anything on your own accord. You have to listen to what America. You know, and they basically couldn't defend themselves because America told them to do. I think it's time to break away from America. Don't rely financially on America. You have to protect yourself as a country. You can't let other people mess up your own self-protection. Israel is a sovereign country. They're not trying to hurt anybody, but to protect themselves, they should be allowed to protect themselves the way they want. They should not worry about what the international community says about them. They say bad things about them. So first of all, I think Netanyahu as the prime minister, wherever the prime minister is, you have to, before these skirmishes happen, you have to make it clear there's a zero tolerance policy. They're not allowed in the middle of the night to just shoot rockets. This happens even in times of peace when there's not in war. They're shooting rockets a lot. You know, they, for whatever reason, you know, they like to dictate. The last couple of years, they're trying to dictate that parades, Yom Yerushalayim, the day of Jerusalem, the liberation of Jerusalem, they're telling people in Palestinians and Palestinian Authority in Gaza, you're not allowed to celebrate this day. If you do, we're going to shoot rockets at you. I mean, excuse me, this is a sovereign country, Israel. They can celebrate whatever they want. You have the right to threaten them if they're going to celebrate this, to shoot rockets at them? I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. And Israel, I think a couple of years ago, didn't have the Jerusalem March, or they altered the normal path of the Jerusalem March so it shouldn't pass through one of the gates, Shar Shem, which is owned by Israel. And the policy on Har HaBayis, right, the Temple Mount, I understand that it's a very holy site for Islam, the third holiest site for Islam, and they have a church, the Al-Aqsa Mosque over there. It's a very important place for that. I'm not saying Muslims shouldn't be allowed there, but Jews are not. It's not fair what goes on over there. Jews are not allowed to pray out loud over there, but Islam are allowed. It's the holiest site in Judaism. The territory is in Israel. Is sovereign Israel. I mean, it's in the heart of Israel, and they have less rights than the Muslims do on the Temple Mount. It should at least be equal. And a lot of and then they make up all this propaganda. Whatever, I'm not gonna get into the propaganda, but listen, the truth of the matter is that it's just not fair. Other countries shouldn't dictate how you do it, whether it be Gaza or Palestinian Authority shouldn't dictate it. They're not even countries. They shouldn't dictate, what goes on in Israel. And when a war breaks out, there's no one that should be telling you how to fight your war, protect your own country. It's a little ridiculous. I think Israel should break apart from America, not rely on American assistance to be able to defend themselves their own way, and not worry about the world system. You don't have to be more ethical than the other party. The terrorists are willing to shoot into Israel. A lot of the rockets kill their own children. You don't have to be so worried. I'm not saying to go take out civilians in Gaza, but whatever is necessary to be done to eliminate terrorists and to eliminate their stockpiles of arsenal of rockets that are being used to shoot into Israel. You don't have to be more ethical than your enemies, especially when the opposition is terrorists. I think there needs to be a shift of thought in this area, and Israel has to be more outspoken. The leader of Israel has to be more outspoken, not tolerate this, and also not worry about international condemnation. You have to do what's best for your country or a sovereign country. You have to take care of yourself. There's a lot of enemies. Israel has a lot of enemies. They do not treat Arab Israelis inferior to anybody else. And people cannot make these statements unless you live here in Israel for at least a year or two and find out. Come to Israel, live here for a year or two, find out what it's like during a war, and find out if Arabs really get treated differently here in Israel. It's not true. I live here. I see it all the time. You see it all the time. You go anywhere, there's a lot of Arabs that are Israelis, and they get treated the exact same way. Say the same as apartheid and BDS. It's just not accurate. It's not accurate. You can't make claims when you don't live here. That's just the truth. That's my opinion about this. Felt like it's a nice time to talk about it. I hope you enjoyed. See you next week.